took this old shelf that I had made out of our closet because we're not going to use it in there anymore, and I wanted to repurpose it, and we thought it might fit really nicely in the laundry room. So the first thing I did is remove all the shelving from it. And then the next thing that needed to be is it needed to be shortened a little bit because it was just too deep. I needed to be about 8 inches to fill the space, and eventually this is going to be a cabinet with doors on it, things like that. But it seemed to fit perfectly in the laundry room, so we thought this would be a nice way to repurpose this thing and be able to reuse it again. But then things changed a little bit. Down in the kitchen, where we decided maybe we should try and clean up the grout a little bit around the kitchen sink, suddenly turned into a much bigger project than we had planned for. Trying to clean the grout out a little bit led to some chipped tiles, and the next thing you know, it was just all the tiles had to come out. Louisa did a great job of chipping out the rest of those tiles and prepping it for whatever we were going to do to fix it, which we hadn't quite figured out yet. It's kind of an interesting problem. The sink sits on a 3/4 inch piece of plywood as the substrate, and then on top of that there's this concretious material that also has chicken wire in it for extra measure, and that's about 3/4 inch thick, and on top of that is the tile. So this is a problem because the original tile that was on there was like a bullnose, kind of a, I don't know, quarter round, something like that, but it left this giant gap at the bottom that had to be filled with grout. This is the stuff that was, this was the thing that was done 50 years ago, and that was their solution, was this. We don't want that giant gap down there anymore. So we tried some more quarter round, and it's still the same problem with that giant gap that's down there. So we're trying to figure out how we could solve that problem of getting rid of that giant gap. And I found this tile, which is sort of an edge corner tile, and it's longer than it needs to be. So we decided that we could cut it. And if we carefully cut it and figured it out right, maybe we could use that as our border tile to go around there. So I measured them up, and I had to build this jig to make these cuts. We probably could have and should have rented a tile saw, but I thought I'd just try it using my diamond blade on my cutoff wheel. And it seemed to work okay. I mean, there was a little bit of chip out here and there, but it seemed to be alright. Made an awful lot of dust in the shop. And then I needed to figure out how I was going to cut the miter corners. And that's where things got a little bit sketchy, because with the handheld grinder like that, it was chipping out quite a bit. And I had to try and do some cleanup on those corners to get them right. But eventually, I got miters that seemed to fit okay, so we went with it. Then Louisa glued all the tiles in with some sort of mastic thin set glue, and they looked pretty good when they were in. This is before grouting. And then the next step was to grout them. We grouted it with white, and it cleaned up pretty good. There's no more gap anymore, and it's ready until we redo the kitchen. And those who do good work are rewarded with chocolate. So the plan is to redo the kitchen maybe in a year or so, and that was just sort of a stopgap measure. But that's how you go from one project to another project and then don't come back to this project. But this one I'm going to get working on, and that's probably next, is to see how I can adapt this shelving into a cabinet for the laundry room. Unfinished projects. This week's unfinished projects are over here. There was a time a while back where I was making these little outrigger canoes out of wood. Most of the profiling and shaping I would do, I did on a sander. There's a video on this channel that shows me making one of these. I've got several of them here. There's a couple there, and there's another one here. There's another one here. These are not the unfinished ones, by the way. I started to make a lot of them. In this box, I have tons of parts. Amas, that's the little floaty bit that goes out on the end. More amas, a whole bag full of them. Here's one that's unfinished, but it's in a bag. A whole mess of them. Some of them are just blocks of wood that have a channel recessed into them. So that's as far as I got with those ones. But there's a bunch of them here. If I had to guess, I'd say probably around 30, maybe 40. I thought that at some point that I might be able to sell these through like an Etsy site or something like that, if there was interest in them. So that's the unfinished projects this time. The canoes. In music, I have started working on the Little Grass Shack tune that I'm doing, where I'm going to play every single one of my ukuleles at the same time in sync in one song. And I think that's 14 to 15 ukuleles, depending on whether or not you count the bass that's around the corner there. So this would be number 15. Pretty excited to see how that works out. That should be a fun music adventure video. So that's what's been happening around here this time. I'm glad we got that sink cleared up. You know, even though it was a bigger project than we'd hoped for, now at least it looks tidy and is less upsetting to have to look at. Next time, I can get back to maybe this cabinet here and see if I can pull that together and get that into the laundry room. And then I'm sure there will be more things to do. There's always something to do. So that's it for this time. Maybe see you next time.